When the thought of modern warfare crosses the mind, we often conjure images of formidable tanks, sleek warplanes, and weaponry designed for destructive purposes. However, an often overlooked but vital component of combat activity is the military ambulance, transporting injured personnel swiftly to mobile hospitals to provide urgent care. In fact, on top of its hundreds of tanks, military trucks, and unique weapons displays, the American Military Museum is home to 7 ambulance models, collectively demonstrating a wide range of service for the United States Armed Forces. Military ambulances in the States have been in significant use since the Civil War, starting off as humble horse-drawn carts. Since then, constant technological advances have produced a great deal of distinct ambulance models, each with their own unique histories. Before diving into the backgrounds of each of these museums' medical transport vehicles, it is important to discuss their shared features. First and foremost, ambulances were operated by a driver and at least one medic, although certain Jeeps required 3 people to help unload stretchers. Development of ambulances stemmed from variants of pre-existing standard truck models for the military. A door usually separated the driver compartment from the rear compartment. Many military ambulances also lacked lights and sirens like seen in civilian life. Several aspects of medical supplies loaded on ambulances evolved throughout the years, such as early to mid-20th century medicinal glass containers instead of current-day IV plastic bags, and technology like the defibrillator was not seen on ambulances until the 60s. Finally, these ambulances were marked with red crosses as designated under the Geneva Convention, hence being called the Geneva Crosses. With all that out of the way, let's dive in. Dodge has produced many trucks for the U.S. Army since the early 1900s. However, by the 1940s, with tensions rising in Europe, military higher-ups knew that their standard trucks needed to be modernized, resulting in the Dodge WC series. From this designation came a variety of trucks that spanned service up until the late Korean War. One important early design was the WC-27 Dodge half-ton ambulance, which was initially the United States standard ambulance model when it officially joined the war. It should be noted, however, that the WC-27 was also produced in conjunction with the WC-9 and WC-18 ambulances, which were nearly identical models. From 1941 to 1942, 2,579 WC-27s were manufactured. Unlike the previous civilian-like Dodge trucks, the WC ambulances were toughened up to survive operating near front lines. The WC-27 had a 6-cylinder flathead, 230 cubic inch engine and was 4-wheel drive, with a top speed of 55 miles per hour. A spare tire was kept on the left side, and optional storage was placed on the outside right wall. An important distinction was the WC-27's radial grille, which was curved, unlike later models like the WC-54, which featured flat grilles. The patient compartment had 4 extendable bunks, meaning it could transport up to 4 immobile patients on stretchers or 7 ambulatory injured personnel. Under the doors of the patient compartment was a pull-out step to help troops enter and exit. Despite production of WC-27s halting in mid-1942, they continued to be used throughout the war, having served in most theaters of World War II. The distinguishable painted Geneva crosses made the WC ambulances prone to enemy strafing, so much so that troops often removed the white paint of the medical markings. Many WC series ambulances, such as the WC-27, were sent over to the UK for their Army and Air Force via the Lend-Lease policy. WC-54s eventually replaced the WC-27 as the primary ambulance for the U.S. military in 1942, and this newer variant continued service throughout the Korean War. Today, WC-27s are mostly housed within museums, like the model at the American Military Museum. Interestingly, this museum's WC-27 was the original model used in the MASH movie and TV series sets. The success of the World War II era WC-27 and WC-54 series influenced U.S. military higher-ups to maintain a relatively conservative design for replacement ambulances at the start of the 1950s. Consequently, Dodge produced the M43 3/4-ton ambulance, which was a variant of the M37 trucks. The M43 used the same 6-cylinder 230 cubic inch engine as the predecessor WC-27s, achieving a max speed around 55 miles per hour. It used a 24-volt electrical system and had both a dome light and a surgical light in the patient compartment. The rear compartment also had a black curtain that could roll over the windows and 4 mounted racks. A foldable step in the back doubled as an extra seat for the medic inside. Overall, the performance output of the M43 was significantly better than the older WC line. From 1951 to 1954, around 50,000 units were constructed. From 1959 to 1968, a slightly upgraded version, the M43B1, was manufactured. M43s were heavily used throughout the Korean War and Vietnam War. They frequently deployed near or at the front lines and were widely utilized in conjunction with air ambulances. Dodge was also contracted with Canada to produce M43s, with these exports being slightly modified to use Canadian-based engine and transmission types. Outside military-related activities, many M43 3/4-ton ambulances were sold off to the public. At least one vehicle was used on television. Today, there are still several models on display and some are brought to vintage motor shows. In the early 1950s, Willys Motor Company was contracted to design post-war military Jeeps, creating the M38 and M38A1 series. Willys was then able to manufacture the M170 Jeep ambulance through a few modifications of the M38A1, including installing a larger fuel tank that increased range to 300 miles and adding 3 litter racks. Other various components included having an optional spare tire on the right side, a drop light that hung by cable, and extra fuel cans. The M170 utilized a Hurricane 4-cylinder engine, having an operational max speed of 50 miles per hour. M170 production lasted from 1953 to 1963, with only around 4,500 units being made. The rear held 2 racks to the right and a third optional rack to the left. Removing the latter allowed an additional 3 personnel to ride along. Troops occasionally would move the spare tire to the hood of the vehicle, which helped open up space for loading injured personnel that needed transport. This vehicle saw action as a frontline ambulance in both the Korean War and Vietnam War. For example, the American Military Museum's M170 served in Vietnam. After its military service, M170s had various applications. They were modified for civilian use as the CJ-6 Jeep, and some M170s were used by NASA. Today, M170s are considered by many collectors to be one of the rarest military Jeep variants. Post-Korean War, the M38 series were phased out by the M151 quarter-ton 4x4 utility trucks, giving rise to the M718 and M718A1 Jeep ambulances. Although the design was conducted by Ford Motors, later production was shared with Kaiser Jeep and AM General. Previous Jeep military designs, like the M170, utilized vertical slot grills. However, this feature was copyright protected by Willys Motor Company, so Ford circumvented this by employing horizontally slotted grills. This meant that despite its namesake, the M718 Jeep ambulances are not officially considered Jeeps. Production of the M718 and M718A1s occurred around the mid-1960s. By extending the rear frame of the base M151, engineers were able to add a canvas roof and create the M718. A spare wheel mount was also placed on the right side. The M718 Jeep ambulance came with a waterproof 24-volt electrical system and 3 stretcher racks. It also had a max speed of 50 miles per hour and was 4-wheel drive. The rear mounting and bracket rails could be removed, which opened space for up to 4 extra ambulatory individuals. Often, the box-shaped canopy was removed, allowing easy access for loading litters quickly. Delegated for frontline medical transport, the M718s served extensively during the Vietnam War. It proved to be quite effective as an all-terrain ambulance and delivered thousands of injured troops to military aid stations. Even with its versatility, the M718 was prone to rollovers, reportedly even at low speeds. As a result, post-war M718s were never widely released for public use, unlike other military Jeep models like the M170. The M151 series were gradually replaced by modern-day Humvees. Nonetheless, many continued to stay in use until the start of the 21st century. Post-World War II, the U.S. Army transitioned to finding cheaper alternatives to the more rugged M37s. One of the earliest civilian-based models they turned to was the M715 trucks, one of which became the M725 5/4-ton ambulance. Although designs for the M715 series began as early as 1965, Kaiser Jeeps officially initiated production of the M715s for the U.S. military in 1967. Construction of these models were each around only half the cost of the predecessor M37s. The M725 ran on a state-of-the-art 6-cylinder Jeep Tornado engine, roughly translating to a max speed of 60 miles per hour. Its 28-gallon tank gave a max range around 225 miles. The vehicle also had a 4-wheel drive with a 24-volt electrical system. Like most military ambulances by this time, it was equipped with a gas heater, ventilator, and surgical lamp, along with optional jerry cans. They had 4 litters installed in the back compartment, but could hold up to 5 stretchers. This meant it had the capacity to transport between 5 immobile patients and up to 8 ambulatory patients. It saw significant action during the Vietnam War, but its weaknesses were quickly apparent. The jungles of Vietnam proved to be tough on the M725, and servicemen complained about high oil consumption and frequent maintenance needs. Their shortcomings caused their production to end after only 2 years in 1969, equating to around 3,700 units total. Post-war, the M725s were either shipped out internationally or stationed in various departments domestically, such as forest services. With the questionable serviceability of the M715s, the U.S. military again began looking towards an alternative that would sufficiently replace the M37 trucks. Consequently, the Commercial Utility Cargo Vehicle, aka CUCVs, were developed in the 1970s. One of the earlier ambulance variants within this program was the M886 ambulance, a 4x4 box ambulance. Note that it also had a sister vehicle called the M893, which is similar except it was a 4x2 drive instead and was appropriately relegated for highway use only. The model was based on the previous civilian-use Dodge W200 trucks. Throughout the mid-1970s, Dodge produced around 4,000 M886 and M893s for the U.S. military. As a CUCV, the M886 was designed for use outside direct hostilities, away from the front lines. These ambulances came with a 318 cubic inch V8 gas engine and automatic transmission with a 4-wheel drive. Mounted on the vehicle were blackout lights, a pinto hitch, and a gas-powered heater called the SP648. The M886 also had a payload of around 12,000 pounds. The rear compartment could hold up to 5 litters and an extra ambulatory patient, or alternatively, 6 ambulatory patients. Many M886 ambulances were stationed overseas, but by the time of the first Gulf War, they were already being phased out by the newer M1010 ambulance series. The M886s were then converted to civilian and government use. This included specialized brush fire teams, National Guard units, and today many M886s can be found on online sites for purchase as recreational campers. The M886 also appeared in the movies Piranha in 1978 and Taps in 1981. Last but certainly not least, the American Military Museum has a M1010 5/4 ton ambulance. Meant as a successor to the M886, this vehicle was another CUCV variant, primarily just the M1008 truck with an ambulance body attached. It was built between 1984 to 1987, but stayed in service up until the end of the 20th century. The M1010 ambulance has a V8 diesel engine, an automatic transmission, and a fuel capacity of 20 gallons. It was designed for up to 20 hours of operation per day and had a max speed of 50 miles per hour on paved roads during the daytime. The M1010 was intended to be used on highways in light off-road situations. The patient cabin included an air conditioning unit, gas-powered heater, 28-volt electrical system, and a gas particulate filter system to mitigate the spread of biological and/or chemical contaminants. Additionally, attached to the back upper right corner of the ambulance box was a double pulley system used for patient lifting. Within the box contained 4 racks for potential litters, but a 5th litter could be laid in the middle aisle in emergencies. Total capacity varied from 4 patients on litters to up to 8 ambulatory patients plus an additional medic. Its service was diverse, deploying in Desert Storm and being sold off to nations such as Lebanon. The M1010 was also utilized in fire departments, National Guard, and for basic civilian use as campers. In summary, ambulances have played a pivotal role for the military. Come visit us at the American Military Museum in South Almonte, California for a walk throughout history, where all of the ambulances discussed can be seen on display. The museum is open on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Visit tankland.com for more information. We hope to see you there.